From a small wooden house on the prairie to real-life fates filled with tears. Little House on the Prairie is not just a gentle memory of American television. In 1974, audiences met the Ingalls family under the sunlight of Walnut Grove, where fatherly love, motherly love, and childhood were tested through poverty, illness, and loss. But more than 50 years later, how have those faces changed? Here is then and now. Number 1. Michael Landon as Charles Ingalls. There are fathers on screen who appear like great sheltering trees, and Michael Landon as Charles Ingalls was exactly that tree. When Little House on the Prairie began in 1974, Michael Landon was 37 years old, already a famous face after Bonanza. But in Walnut Grove, he was no longer the charming cowboy. He became a man carrying his entire family on his worn shoulders. Charles Ingalls appeared in a work shirt with a warm smile, eyes always looking toward the fields, the sawmill, and his growing children. In the series, Charles did not only farm, repair the house, and take odd jobs, but also stood in the middle of the town's moral storms. When the family lacked money, he swallowed his pride to work. When his daughter suffered, he quietly held her. When the community was divided, he was often the first to step forward and reconcile. The role stood out because Charles was not a perfect monument-like father, but someone who could be angry, tired, helpless, then rise again through faith and family love. In real life, Michael Landon was also the powerful soul of the show. Actor, director, writer, and producer. But behind the spotlight was a turbulent personal life, with 3 marriages, 9 children, loud divorces, and the image of a man both beloved and controversial. After Little House, he continued with Highway to Heaven, as if still wanting to tell stories about kindness. In 1991, Michael Landon passed away from pancreatic cancer at the age of 54. By 2026, he has been gone for 35 years. But whenever the opening theme plays, Charles Ingalls still seems to walk back from the fields, brushing dust from his hands, looking at his family, reminding viewers that a father may be gone, but his warmth remains. Number 2. Karen Grassle as Caroline Ingalls. If Charles was the roof, Caroline Ingalls was the flame that kept that roof from going dark, and Karen Grassle turned Ma into a gentle yet unbreakable figure. In 1974, Karen Grassle was 32 when she stepped into the role of Caroline, a frontier mother living through poverty, harsh winters, illness, childbirth, and the constant worry of the next meal. In the series, Caroline did not loudly take the spotlight. She existed through small but heavy acts, mending clothes, cooking dinner when there was barely food, teaching, caring for the sick, comforting Charles when he failed, and silently enduring pain to keep the family from falling apart. There were episodes where Caroline faced danger, loneliness, even illness. But she did not collapse in grand tragedy. She endured through her eyes, her soft voice, and her belief that tomorrow still required a lit stove. The role stood out because Karen did not play Caroline as a fairy tale mother, but as a woman with a backbone, kind, but not easily bent. In real life, Karen Grassle moved from theater to television, then returned more to stage work and memoir writing. Her major drama was not Glamorous Scandal, but the darker corners behind the show. She wrote about her struggle with alcohol, professional wounds, and a tense relationship with Michael Landon, especially regarding salary and treatment on set. In 2026, Karen Grassle is 84 years old, still remembered as an iconic television mother. Back then, Caroline stood in front of the small house calling her children to dinner. Now, that image feels like an old lamp. Not dazzling, but the longer you look, the warmer it becomes. Number 3. Melissa Gilbert as Laura Ingalls. Laura Ingalls did not enter Little House on the Prairie as a well-behaved girl standing still in a frame. She ran, stumbled, got angry, cried, argued, loved, and grew up before the audience's eyes. And Melissa Gilbert was the beating heart of that journey. In 1974, Melissa Gilbert was 10 years old, still very young but already carrying the energy of a central character. Mischievous eyes, braided hair, and a voice that could shift from stubborn to shattered within a single scene. In the series, Laura began as Half Pint, the little girl running across grassy hills, jealous of Mary, clashing with Nellie Oleson, loving her father so deeply that every word Charles spoke felt like a life rule. Through each season, Laura witnessed poverty, illness, death, injustice at school, family departures and returns, and eventually stepped into adulthood with her love for Alonzo Wilder. The role stood out because Laura was the bridge between the audience and Walnut Grove. Every event passed through her eyes, from childish mischief to adult pain. In real life, Melissa Gilbert also grew up under studio lights, continued acting, wrote memoirs, became president of the Screen Actors Guild, and even entered politics. But her real life was far from smooth. Adopted as a child, shocked by her adoptive father's death, going through multiple marriages and divorces, and facing the pressure of being a former child star. In 2026, Melissa Gilbert is 61 years old, living a slower life, farther from Hollywood, but the name Laura still clings to her like prairie wind. Back then, Laura ran down the hill at sunset. Now, that memory still runs in the hearts of generations, never tiring. Number 4, Melissa Sue Anderson as Mary Ingalls. Mary Ingalls initially appeared as the orderly light in the Ingalls family, more obedient, calmer, brighter than Laura, and because of that, her tragedy felt even more painful. In 1974, Melissa Sue Anderson was 11 when she took on the role of Mary, the eldest sister with pure beauty and eyes calm like water before a storm. In the early seasons, Mary was the studious, obedient girl, often the contrast to Laura's mischief. But the series did not let her remain in perfection. Each event pulled her out of childhood. The greatest turning point came when Mary lost her sight, left Walnut Grove for a school for the blind, and learned how to live again in darkness. From a girl who once saw the world clearly, Mary had to relearn reading, walking, trusting Adam Kendall, and eventually became a teacher, a wife, and a mother who endured deep loss. The role stood out because it required Melissa Sue Anderson to completely change her rhythm. No longer just the model daughter, but a young woman stripped of sight yet determined to keep her dignity. In real life, Melissa Sue Anderson continued acting, earned an Emmy nomination for Mary, appeared in many television and film works, and later became a Canadian citizen. Her real-life drama was far quieter than her co-stars. No major scandals, but distance, differences on set, and years of being known as someone who chose privacy over fame. In 2026, Melissa Sue Anderson is 63 years old. Back then, Mary stepped into darkness in one of the most heartbreaking storylines. Now, audiences still remember her as proof that some characters do not need to see the light, because they become the light themselves. Number 5, Lindsay Greenbush as Carrie Ingalls. Carrie Ingalls is the kind of small character audiences might think stands at the edge of the story. But in the memory of Little House on the Prairie, she feels like the innocent laughter that kept the Ingalls home alive with childhood. In 1974, Lindsay Greenbush was 4 years old when she and her twin sister Sydney alternated playing Carrie, the youngest daughter of Charles and Caroline in the early seasons. On screen, Carrie often appeared with tiny steps, wide-eyed wonder, sometimes running after Laura and Mary, sometimes carried by her father across the fields, sometimes standing in the wooden house as a symbol of the fragility the family had to protect. Carrie did not have dramatic storylines like Laura or Mary, but that quiet presence created her uniqueness. She was childhood that did not yet understand poverty or fear, yet was always there in family moments. There were episodes where Carrie wandered into imagination, sometimes placed in the middle of the Ingalls family crises. And each time, viewers saw why Charles and Caroline had to keep fighting. The role stood out because it was played by twin sisters, yet merged into a single image in the audience's mind. In real life, Lindsay Greenbush left Hollywood early, choosing education and private life rather than chasing fame. Her real-life drama was not prison or scandal, but the quiet fall of a child star, leaving a hugely famous television family at a young age and learning to live outside the spotlight. Later, her relationship with Daniel Sanchez, whom she met at Big Sky Ranch, felt like a full-circle story. In 2026, Lindsay Greenbush is 55 years old. Back then, Carrie stood under her parents' shadow. Now, that image remains in viewers' hearts like soft footsteps on the wooden floor of a house that has become legend. Number 6, Jonathan Gilbert as Willie Oleson. If Nellie was a blazing fire, Willie Oleson was like a small spark at first weak and overlooked, but slowly growing in his own way. In 1974, Jonathan Gilbert was only 7 years old when he played Willie, the son of the Oleson family, often seen as less capable than his sister. In the early seasons, Willie appeared as a child controlled by his mother, academically unremarkable, frequently overshadowed by Nellie. But over time, he matured, began to find his own voice, and gradually stepped out of the shadow of Harriet and Nellie. His moments of standing up, though small, carried meaning. It was the journey of finding identity within a pressuring family. The role stood out because it reflected quiet growth, not dramatic, but steady. In real life, Jonathan Gilbert chose a completely different path. After leaving acting, he disappeared from Hollywood, pursued education, and became a financial broker. No scandals, no noise, but still a quiet kind of drama, walking away from fame at a young age. He is the adoptive brother of Melissa Gilbert, though their relationship has had distance over time. In 2026, Jonathan Gilbert is 58 years old, living privately, almost detached from his acting past. Back then, Willie was the boy behind the store counter. Now, he stands as proof that not everyone chooses to stay in the spotlight, and sometimes, walking away is the strongest choice. Number 7. Richard Bull as Nels Oleson. There are men who do not need to raise their voices to be remembered. And Nels Oleson is exactly that kind of man, a quiet contrast between kindness and a marriage stretched to its limits. When Little House on the Prairie began in 1974, Richard Bull was already 50 years old, bringing deep acting experience to the role of the Oleson store owner, a gentleman trapped between his wife and his conscience. In the series, Nels is not a hero. He is someone who often bows his head before Harriet Oleson, enduring control, poor decisions, and the selfishness of his own family. Yet it is in small moments defending Laura, quietly helping the poor, silently correcting his children's mistakes that Nels becomes one of the most sympathetic characters. The role stood out because he represented men suffocated in marriage but still holding on to decency. In real life, Richard Bull avoided major scandals, but his life was not entirely smooth. A long career without overwhelming fame, and being closely tied to a supporting role that was hard to escape. He had a stable marriage with Barbara Collentine, something rare compared to many co-stars. In 2014, Richard Bull passed away at the age of 89. By 2026, he has been gone for more than a decade. But whenever Nels lowers his head before Harriet and then quietly does the right thing, audiences still feel a very real sadness, the sadness of those who live their entire lives without fully being themselves. Number 8. Katherine MacGregor as Harriet Oleson. Harriet Oleson did not enter Walnut Grove as an ordinary woman. She arrived like a storm of arrogance. And Katherine MacGregor turned this character into an unforgettable symbol of irritation. In 1974, Katherine MacGregor was 49 years old when she took on the role of Harriet, the domineering wife of Nels and the store owner who believed herself above everyone else. In the series, Harriet embodied class prejudice, pride, and at times cruelty. She favored Nellie, looked down on Laura, manipulated her husband, and constantly sought control over the community. But Little House did not write Harriet as a one-dimensional villain. There were moments where her vulnerability showed fear of abandonment and a twisted form of love for her family. This mixture made Harriet vivid and unforgettable. The role stood out because Katherine was not afraid to make the audience dislike her. She pushed the character to extremes while preserving a trace of humanity. In real life, Katherine MacGregor was very different. She turned toward meditation, spirituality, and lived a relatively private life. Her biggest drama was not scandal but inner transformation, gradually leaving Hollywood and choosing a spiritual path over fame. In 2018, she passed away at the age of 93. By 2026, Harriet Oleson still lives in the audience's memory like a sharp, echoing laugh inside a small store, annoying, yet essential to the Prairie story. Number 9. Alison Arngrim as Nellie Oleson. There are characters who make audiences want to step into the screen just to teach them a lesson. And Nellie Oleson stands at the top of that list, a girl spoiled into becoming Walnut Grove's nightmare. In 1974, Alison Arngrim was 12 years old when she portrayed Nellie, with perfect blonde curls and a mocking smile. In the series, Nellie did not just bully Laura, she represented selfishness, hypocrisy, and prejudice, using her mother's wealth and influence to dominate others, from the classroom to town life. But over time, Nellie changed. From a cruel little princess, she experienced love, marriage, and gradually learned to grow. Her falls, both literal and emotional, became defining moments that made her not only hated, but memorable. The role stood out because Alison Arngrim's performance was so convincing that audiences disliked her in real life. Yet behind the scenes was a completely different story. Alison endured a traumatic childhood, later revealing abuse within her family, and became an activist against child abuse. Her life carried deep pain, but also strength. In 2026, Alison Arngrim is 63 years old, still appearing at fan events and sharing her story. Back then, Nellie was Laura's nightmare. Now, Alison is a powerful voice for children who have suffered an unexpectedly beautiful contrast. After more than half a century, Little House on the Prairie is not just a television show, it is a living memory. Those people, whether gone or changed, still exist in every frame. And perhaps what keeps us returning is not the story, but the feeling that it never truly left.